I think I already know the answer to this because I think you and I are very different. We're polar opposites.
Very similar, but very different at the same time.
Especially when it comes to, I feel like, how we handle this kind of thing. So we're going to start off with a question for you.
Okay, yes.
Would you consider yourself a jealous girlfriend?
No, not at all. I mean, I've said it before, but Cody and I have been together for, it'll be 16 years in May.
Mhm.
And no, I don't, I trust him completely.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much always been that way
Mhm.
because we've been together since teenagers. And I don't even I really wasn't jealous back then either. I was like, yeah, you want to go hang out with your boys? Go hang out with your boys. I don't give a shit.
But what about when it comes to other women? If Cody was like, I met this new girl and we're hanging out, would you be cool with it?
Probably not. Without any context,
Yes.
I would certainly have questions. But like he goes for like lunch and stuff with his female coworkers and stuff all the time, and I'm like, yeah, what did you have? Was it good? Like, it does not bother me in the slightest. Whereas I know some people would be like, oh hell no.
Yeah. See, my whole thing, and I'm gonna sound crazy, so I'm gonna try to defend myself at the same time.
You know what? You're allowed a little bit of crazy.
I am. And so with Steve, I trust him 100%.
Mhm.
He has never given me reason not to trust him. He's a fabulous partner. I love him dearly. He's great. However, I always like to have that little bit of fear in the back of his mind.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
For sure.
We do have this and it's a joke. I'm sure he knows I'm not serious. Maybe. I don't know. Where there's always that fear in the back of his mind where if he says like, oh, what if I did this? I'm like, I'd kill you.
That's okay. So the thing is, like, I trust Cody 100% likewise, right? We've been together a long time. I have no reason not to trust him. I'm very much aware that serial killers have had whole families who did not know that they were serial killers. Yeah. So entirely a possibility.
Could be anybody.
Not likely, but a possibility. But I'm the fighter of the relationship and Cody is the lover. Me and my sister, we grew up with a sergeant major of the infantry father. We knew how to kick ass by the time we were 5. Cody and his brother were not brought up that way. So in that sense, as much as I'm smaller, I'm pretty confident in my ability to give him a run for his money if it came to kicking his ass.
Right. And for me, I always say I'm Bosnian. We're passionate people. So I will often he'll just be like, well, what if I said this actress was attractive? I'd be like, I'd kill you both. I'd make you watch. And that's like our joke. And like, he knows I'm not homicidal. I hope. He might genuinely be afraid for his life. I don't know, but
healthy fear.
Yeah. But the whole time I was working on this script, I had it in the back of my mind where I'm like, if it took just the wrong series of events, how many women could this happen to? Because this story is just so, I don't want to say it's funny because it's not. It's not funny. Murder is not funny.
Because it gets pretty wacky.
But this is like something out of like a really bad horror comedy.
The way it escalates is almost comical.
Yes.
Because our character today, she is a character.
Yes.
And she gets wild quickly.
If we had the copyright ability to do it, I would start this episode with the song Crazy Bitch by Buck Cherry.
Oh, that would be very appropriate.
Let's go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum. I promise we're not secretly serial killers.
I promise. Wouldn't that be ironic, though?
I can't step on ants.
No. And I feel bad for literally stuffed animals if I don't, pick them up once in a while.
Yeah.
So, homicidal maniac, not me.
We're fine.
But we're heading back to our old-timey roots this week with a shocking story involving jealousy and murder in the early days of Hollywood.
This case has been linked to others we've covered, including Winnie Ruth Judd and even the Black Dahlia. So we're going way back.
Today, we are talking about Clara Phillips, who, like our girl Winnie, would go on to be dubbed the Tiger Woman due to the viciousness of her crime.
Clara was only 22 years old when she savagely murdered a woman she thought was having an affair with her husband.
Keyword, thought.
Our story takes us to July of 1922, a time where the term psychopath was not publicly understood. Back then, it was known that people generally killed for one of two reasons.
Only two.
Right. Either they were simply evil, or they were regular people who suffered some kind of psychotic break that led to their crimes.
But Clara was a little bit different. By today's standards, she could definitely be classified as someone with psychopathic tendencies.
What she did was initially called a crime of passion. It would later be discovered that not only had she premeditated the murder, but that she also had very little remorse for her actions.
As always, we're going to start with who Clara Phillips was and how she was capable of something so heinous at a young age.
She was born Clara Ann Weaver on June 23, 1898, to parents John and Anna. Clara was the fourth of 5 children and was especially close to her youngest sister, Etta. The family moved around Texas a fair bit before finally settling down in Houston during her teen years.
Clara stood out as a very good-looking girl to those around her. She soon learned to use this to her advantage.
We'll see this work out well for her a fair bit throughout the story.
Clara's family had a violent history and overall didn't have the best reputation. Even Clara seemed to have a penchant for lying. She could be manipulative and made up lies involving a story about being kidnapped as a child. That is, kids do make things up.
It's a pink flag.
It's a pink flag.
When she was 15, she met 22-year-old Armour Phillips.
And yeah.
We always say that. It was a different time, but I don't like it.
It was a different time, but at that age, the age gap is gross. He was able to woo her pretty easily. Armour was not only a good-looking guy, he was ambitious and promised her the world, saying that the two would build their dream lives out west.
He was related to the Mellon family, who were incredibly rich and well known for their influence in banking, oil, law, and politics. It's important to note that while he had ties to prominent people, he was from what could be called the less successful part of the family.
The two married on November 13th, 1913, and both had high aspirations. By the time the 20s had come around, oil wells were springing up everywhere, and with that, people were finding fortune in the booming industry. Armour had found work as an oil stock salesman. He was aggressive in his work and did quite well for himself, though some reports seem to refer to him as a bit of a con man.
The word swindler comes up a lot when you're reading about him.
That's very 1920s. Oh, yeah, he was a swindler, eh?
Clara, on the other hand, had dreams of becoming an actress. They moved to Los Angeles, where she began working as a chorus girl at the Pantages Theater in Hollywood. She also worked as a model and a movie extra. She eventually became known for having an unprofessional attitude and lost some pretty significant jobs because of it.
She basically didn't really get along with the other women and often had like full-on fights with the performers.
She wanted fame and fortune, and he wanted to give her the world.
When you go about it the wrong way, that can be a very deadly combination.
Yes.
The two had bought a beautiful house and were often seen wearing very expensive clothing. On the outside, it appeared that they were living a life of luxury, but that was not the case. Most of what they owned had been purchased on credit.
The couple fought often. Despite this, Clara did her best to be a devoted wife to her husband. One of the main problems that they had was that the two worked very different schedules. She eventually quit her job so she could spend more time with him and focus more on her duties as a housewife.
Which is pretty unfortunate because despite the issues that she had, she was starting to make a little bit of a name for herself.
In her mind, she left her dreams behind to focus on him, and therefore expected her husband to pay more attention to her and above all be grateful for her sacrifice.
And this was not the case. Armour was rarely home and didn't seem to understand the significance of what she had left behind for him.
This was a big deal for her because she's like, I was going to become somebody. I was doing well.
Yeah.
I left it all behind for you. And what did I get?
Nothing, because he's never home.
Yeah.
So she may as well have just kept on working.
That's when the rumors started. Their neighbors noticed how often he was gone, and word began to spread that he was having an affair. He was spending a lot of time at the bank, and people started talking about the attention that he was giving to one of the tellers.
The teller in question was a 19-year-old widow named Alberta Gibson Tremaine Meadows. She had been married less than a year when her husband died in a tragic work accident. 19 to be already a widow? Oh, that poor girl.
I was very curious about how he died because, during that time, I was like, did he die in like some kind of a war? Did he die like, I don't know, doing something?
It literally could have died as from tuberculosis, or you know what I mean?
Right, there's so many other ways to die, but no, it was just this horrible accident that happened to him while he was at work, and just like that, she's 19 years old and she's a widow.
This poor girl.
What originally began as neighborhood gossip eventually made its way to Clara. She didn't have any actual proof of the affair, but was immediately engulfed with feelings of rage and betrayal.
She became obsessed with these thoughts and came up with a plan. She needed to do whatever it took to hold on to her husband, no matter what. The only solution, of course, was to kill Alberta.
She really jumped to that.
I just if you really, there's many different ways to deal with a cheating spouse or a cheating partner. And if you really want to confront someone, sure, walk down to the bank, stand in the line for her, and confront her at work if that's what it is. Right? I'm all for that. But to just be like, I'm going to kill that bitch.
Yeah.
I've never met her. I don't know her.
You can say that.
You can be like, oh, I'll kill her. But you haven't even confirmed.
No.
You have no evidence. It's just gossip. Bring it up to your husband, for God's sakes. Be like, hi, have you been smushing with the bank teller chick?
Exactly. Before she made any hasty decisions, she decided to begin her own little investigation.
Oh, thank God for that.
She followed Armour and Alberta for a couple of days in an attempt to catch them in the act. Nothing really came of that.
And by that we mean at no point did she ever see them alone together. On one occasion, she did see them interacting with each other at the bank, but the girl was simply doing her job and helping him with his banking.
For her, that was enough.
On July 10th, 1922, she stopped by a local store and made her way to the hardware department. She found a 15-cent hammer and turned to the clerk. She then asked him if he thought that it could kill a woman.
The clerk, thinking it was a joke, laughed at the situation and said, yes, it is if you hit her hard enough.
Oh, boy. Probably thought nothing of it.
No.
Reads the headlines later.
Yep.
The next day, Clara met up with an old co-worker of hers, former chorus girl Peggy Caffey. The two spent some time at a speakeasy where they chatted and caught each other up on what was going on in their lives.
Soon, the subject of the affair came up. By the end of their conversation, they had both decided something had to be done about Alberta, so they made their way to the bank and waited outside for her to finish her shift.
When they saw her, they approached her and explained that they had both had too much to drink and needed a ride to Clara's sister's home. Alberta happily obliged, and the women got into her car and they drove away together. This poor girl is like, oh my God, these girls are drunk. I'll give them a ride home.
Right? They made their way to Montego Drive. When she asked where her sister lived, Clara instructed her to just keep driving a little further. They reached the end of the road. Clara asked her to pull over so the two could have a private conversation about something important. Alberta thought this was kind of weird, but did what Clara asked.
As soon as they got out of the car, Clara began to accuse her of sleeping with Armour, which of course she denied. That didn't seem to matter to Clara, who had already made up her mind.
She began attacking Alberta, who didn't do much to defend herself. Instead, she took off and ran down the road in an attempt to get some help. As she was running, her heel broke and she fell, which allowed Clara to catch up to her.
She stood over Alberta and wielded her weapon. She hit her in the face close to 50 times, and while she was hitting her, she used the claw end of the hammer, which left marks on her face that detectives would say it made her look like she had been attacked by a tiger.
Clara looked down at what she had done and felt it wasn't enough. She then rolled a 50-pound boulder onto her chest and took off in Alberta's car with Peggy.
During all of this, Peggy was sitting in the car watching. She became hysterical. Clara, seeing this, told Peggy to keep what she saw a secret, or she would do the same thing to her. She then drove her home. So poor Peggy, she goes out with Clara for some drinkies, work friends, and next thing she knows, she's accessory to the brutal murder of a 19-year-old widow. Peggy, no wonder Peggy's freaking out. I'd be freaking out.
Wait till you hear about how she was treated during the trial.
Oh, boy.
Clara then parked Alberta's car in the driveway of her own home and went inside.
Armour was home and was understandably quite shocked to see his wife absolutely covered in blood. She greeted him happily and gave him a big kiss. She explained to him that she had taken care of everything, and with a big smile, she simply said,
I guess it's murder.
She then told him that she was so happy she was going to cook him the best dinner of his life. Armour's like, what's murder? Dinner? Why are you covered in what is happening?
And Clara is just thrilled.
Yeah, she's bouncing off the walls at this point.
It appears that Armour didn't react how she expected. He was appalled at her appearance and what she had said.
Despite all of this, Armour, the ever-loving husband, decided he needed to help his wife and try to make this all go away. He took Alberta's car and disposed of it. They then booked a hotel room downtown and spent the evening together. Okay, Armour, I'm starting to question your sanity here because you probably suspect, at the very least at this point, and all the evidence is pointing towards the case that your wife has just done something really bad. And you're like, you know what, honey? No worries. I will destroy the car or get rid of it, and then we'll go for some num-nums downtown.
I'll take care of it. Ugh. The next day, he bought her a train ticket to Texas so that she could lay low. Clara was thrilled. In her mind, she had just gotten away with murder. When Armour got home, reality set in and he couldn't live with what she did. He went to the police station and filed a report against his wife.
Clara would never make it to Texas. She was promptly arrested and taken back to LA. The press had found out about what had happened, and they all wanted to be the first to report on the killer tiger woman.
Peggy had heard that the crime had gone public and provided a witness report on what she saw.
As Clara's trial began, her story was everywhere. Finally, she had found the fame she had always wanted. She was thrilled to be the center of attention, and she was often seen flirting with reporters, all the while saying that she was fully devoted to her husband, and all the while talking about what a wonderful wife she was.
Yeah, I just loved him so much. I brutally murdered a woman. Isn't that crazy?
And by the way, you're so cute.
Oh my God, it's the 20s.
Clara had a huge number of admirers, and during this time, she had countless letters written to her and received gifts and flowers.
On September 17th, her trial began. Armour fully funded her defense team, which plummeted him even further into debt. He can be seen by her side in many of the courtroom photos with his arm around her and a huge smile on his face.
And the funny thing is in those photos, they're sitting together and they're kind of close.
Yeah.
He's got his arm around her and she just looks, the only word I can describe it is she looks really proud.
Thrilled. Like, she is loving it.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, he is spending all this time with me. I have all this attention. And I don't think it's clicking for her.
During the trial, she continued to blame Peggy for the murder.
Peggy's like, I don't have anything to fucking do with this.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and this is from old newspaper reports.
Okay.
So when they're talking about Clara in the newspapers, they're like, this beautiful seductress. Like, you know, they're talking about how gorgeous she is and whatever, how charming she is, how great she is. And then they talk about Petty, and they're like, and her mousy friend.
Okay, Peggy, like I said, she thought she was going out for a couple of drinks with an ex-coworker.
Yeah.
And suddenly is witnessing a woman having her face caved in.
And then being blamed for it.
Peggy, justice for Peggy.
Yes, justice for Peggy indeed.
Clara, who up to this point had come off as charming, dropped the act and began screaming at Peggy. This only turned people further against her.
They're like, wait a minute. Because that's what they say is when you have someone who is a psychopath, it's a mask.
Oh, yes.
And they wear that mask and they come off as very charming and sweet. And sometimes, you know, they become very successful because of that. But eventually that mask falls. And when that mask falls, it's like, whoa.
Yes, it is very much like the curtain has dropped and all has been revealed.
The jury included 9 men and 3 women. On October 16th, Clara Phillips was found guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to a minimum of 10 years in prison with the possibility of life to be spent in the infamous San Quentin prison. Originally, the death penalty was on the table. Many members of the jury would later say that her life was probably spared because of her good looks.
Well, that is a common theme with female murderers throughout history. It does often get brought up. Interestingly enough, some reports do say that the 3 women on the jury were pushing for the death penalty, while it was actually the men who voted against it. I do find that very interesting.
Yeah.
Also, and this is maybe perhaps like movie magic. So by all means, if anyone out there knows, correct me if I'm wrong. But it's supposed to be a jury of your peers, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like as a woman, at least half of the jury should be female.
I agree with that completely, but when I found out that the jury had women in it in the 1920s, I was actually pretty impressed.
That is very true, because I'm not entirely sure women even had the right to vote at that point in the States.
They couldn't do much.
They couldn't do much at all. Now, dear listeners, you would think that this is where our story ends, but it does not. Before she was sent to San Quentin, Clara decided to once again take matters into her own hands.
On December 5th, reports came out saying that Clara Phillips had escaped.
And if that doesn't sound crazy enough, wait until you hear how she did it.
Now, I want to just take a second and read a newspaper headline that I found.
Okay.
So on this headline, it's a picture of Clara when she did a bathing suit ad for a pretty significant company.
Racy.
And this is the headline. Bars, walls, borders. Wilderness couldn't hold this pretty western mountain murderess with the daring of a gorilla and the charm of a butterfly.
Oh, sensational. 1920s newspaper headlines were something else. She cut the bars of her cell and climbed onto the roof of the jail and then climbed 3 stories down to freedom.
Or at least that's one of the stories that people thought. Some say that she somehow convinced a guard to simply let her out.
I think that was probably more likely the case.
Just you wait, my friend. Just you wait.
They really did have no idea how she did it. But interestingly enough, we do know that her father had left his home the night before and rented a room in a hotel. The leading theory was that she was making her way to Mexico to start a new life on the run. Authorities in neighboring countries were informed.
In April of 1923, police in El Salvador spotted her but were unable to capture her. Shortly after, she was arrested in Honduras with a friend, one of her sisters, and a male journalist who covered her case.
Ooh.
She was arrested and kept in the country until she could be extradited back to the United States.
If you thought one jail escape was enough for Clara, well, you couldn't be more wrong. Because while in Honduras, she convinced a group of 15-year-old boys to help her escape once again. Luckily, a guard overheard this situation and arrested the boys. She do be flirting.
She do be flirting indeed. On May 2nd, she was brought back to Los Angeles, and it was discovered that the journalist had somehow smuggled a saw to her, which she used to cut the bars. He and 2 other men then lifted her onto the roof, and she proceeded to jump down.
I stand corrected, Clara Phillips, you tiger woman. I should have known better. In June, she was brought back to San Quentin, where soon after, she attempted to take her own life.
It seems after this, she began to accept her fate and focused on becoming a model prisoner. 3 years later, she was granted a temporary release to see her mother, who was near the end of her life.
In 1929, she petitioned the governor to release her so that she could focus on being a good wife. She was denied this request.
Let me out of jail. I know I killed somebody, but I just want to be a wife.
Just want to be a good husband. That's why I'm here in the first place.
Oh, I just want to be a good wife to my husband.
She spent time in prison studying theater and singing along with dentistry.
Singing dentist, I guess. During all of this, Clara still showed no remorse. In a 1931 interview, she was quoted as saying,
"I fought with Alberta on top of Montecito Drive to protect my only love I've ever known. Armour L. Phillips is my baby. He has been my only baby. He is my very life. And when I realized he was being taken from me, I fought, so that I may always have him."
I think fought is the wrong word. Like, that word doesn't mean what you think it means, because Alberta did not fight you. You caved her skull in. She had no chance. She tried to run away from you.
Yeah, you attacked.
She didn't even fight back. And you're like, no, I fought. No, this bitch didn't know you existed. Oh my God, this woman. The following year, Clara met a convicted burglar named Thomas Price. She was stripped of most of her privileges after officers found a love letter that he had written to her.
They wrote a lot of letters to each other, apparently. So, Miss Housewife here.
I was gonna say, that's not very I'm being a good little housewife.
She applied for parole twice, once in 1933 and again in 1934, but was denied.
As for Armour, he stood by his wife for quite a while, but the two eventually just stopped talking and divorced.
On June 17th, 1935, she was released from prison.
I would have been concerned if I was Armour. I'd be like, oh, we gotta move and she can never find out where we moved to.
Yeah, exactly. Clara claimed that her goals were to be a model housewife and a dental assistant. Not much is known about her afterwards. We do know that she was spotted in Texas all the way in 1961.
Wow.
And she died 8 years later. She was buried under the name Anne C. Weaver.
Ah. So wait a second, though. How does she tie into the Black Dahlia then?
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, if you go back to our Black Dahlia series, which was almost 140 episodes ago.
Episode 5, I believe.
There was a time where they believed that it was a woman who killed Elizabeth Short.
Yes, that's right.
And the leading theory was that it was a jealous woman who thought that maybe she was talking to her husband or possibly a fellow performer. And Clara Phillips fell under both of those things of being a jealous woman and a performer. And so she was someone who, when they were investigating that death, they were like, well, she's done this before. Maybe she did it again. But with how different the crimes were, it was really never able to be proven.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it would be kind of unusual to have sort of two homicidal women operating at the same time. Not impossible, just improbable. But the nature of the murders themselves are so wildly different. Like, to go from bludgeoning someone to death to full on, like, eviscerating and leaving their body on a sidewalk for all to see, that is quite an escalation. But Clara was pretty crazy.
And Elizabeth Short was known for having ties to married men.
It is very true. So
they thought that that could be linked. And for a very long time, that was one of the leading theories. So it was interesting to me how the two cases kind of tied together. Because during that time, those are three of the most famous cases involving women: Clara, the Black Dahlia, and Winnie Ruth Judd. And Winnie Ruth Judd was only like, I think, 10 years afterwards. And again, they called her the Tiger Woman too. And so I thought that was just kind of a neat little link to the Black Dahlia.
I like that when it kind of all ties back a little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's your red string and like corkboard situation.
Very much so.
But I like little things like that. Little connections in history. We talk about it a lot with the serial killers of the 70s and 80s in California because there were so many operating at the same time. And a lot of the heavy hitters. I don't really like that term, but that's, the big boys. So yeah, I like these little coincidences in history that kind of come together because time is, so much happens. There's so many human beings. And for these little ticks in time to happen, I don't know, they're just interesting coincidences.
Yeah. I thought that was a kind of a neat connection.
So that is the story of Clara Phillips, the Tiger Woman. I guess, you know what, if you are a young lad working in your local home hardware and a lady buys nothing but a hammer and then makes a joke about it, maybe, just maybe, ask some follow-up questions or maybe write down a description or something.
Or if she asks if you could kill someone with it, maybe say, I don't have the authority to answer that question.
Yeah,
that's above my
I'm
pay
going
grade.
to plead the fifth on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
As always, at the end of our episodes, we give a big shout out to our supporters across all of the platforms, but specifically on Patreon, our Grim VIPs, which is our top tier on Patreon. We always give you all a shout out at the end of the episodes.
And don't forget, we do have other tiers. We have a free tier for early episode reveals. We've got a Discord, all sorts of fun stuff. You can get a week-long trial and you can see our faces and watch the videos. Super fun. But a huge thank you to Yegpla, Steven Centauri, Paranoid Pop Rocks, Mayhem Mudkip, Lisa, Nova, Kevinus Musicus, Judy, Carrie, Bob, Brian, and Atlantean Jedi.
Whoop whoop, thank you so much. As always, you the titty city, you the bee's knees, you the cat's pajamas.
Why wouldn't you want your name on that list?
Right? You want your name on that list.
Yeah,
I
you do.
promise.
Absolutely.
Also, big shout out to everybody that hangs out with us on Saturdays on YouTube. We have a premiere of our episode every Saturday. And you can join us in the chat, let us know your thoughts on things, ask questions. We just have conversations. It's a fun time.
It's super fun. It's 12 p.m. MST each week. You can set up your notifications so you get a little ding on your phone that tells you to come hang out with us and have a good time.
Yeah, and we always give you a few minutes of warning on the social medias before it's happening as well. Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. This has been The Grim Curriculum.
I thought this was a neat one.
Okay.
Most men who climb Mount Everest or other tall mountains experience an erection due to how the altitude impacts blood pressure.
I guess climbing big mountains makes you hard.
Yeah.
Bye.